like signings and Comic Cons when people are being really fucking creepy and weird and acting like they know you when they don't know you and you've never met them before. Like, what does that do to the individual, I wonder? And I think what it does... Hey everyone, welcome back to my YouTube machine. I'm Cheryl, and this week we're talking about why it is you're so obsessed with them. Why is it you're so obsessed with this person that you have feelings for? And there's a really juicy reason and deep psychological reason. Of course, it's a deep psychological reason because it's me and I like to go deep into the psychology, as we know. This is actually on the back of a conversation I had this week with a good friend of mine, and she was explaining this psychological process to me. And I said to her, hey, if this happens and someone has a break in this psychological process, do you think it's possible that it would manifest in this way in relationships, in the obsession with romantic partners? And she said, oh my God, absolutely, yes. I've never thought about it that way, but it absolutely could fit. So I'm going to explain the psychological theory as well as what we can do to break that cycle. And I'm also going to let you know what dating drama archetype, what relationship pattern this is linked to. So the pattern it's linked to is Miss Obsessed. Now, I'll explain briefly what Miss Obsessed is. If you want to know more about her, I go more into her as an archetype in the Dating Drama Archetypes video, which is linked down below in the comments. Miss Obsessed, it does what it says in the tin really. She's obsessed with the particular object of her affection, and the person can be different, but the pattern is very much the same. This man, this woman that she is really into becomes the object of her affection and the focus of her attention, her energy, her thoughts, everything is consumed by this person, and she becomes completely, as the phrase suggests, obsessed with this person. It's very kind of shadowy Scorpio type energy. So if you're familiar with astrology, and I'm not talking about the bullshit horoscopes you read in magazines, I mean real deep astrology and the study of the soul, and you understand all of those energies. Scorpio is very much linked to this, right? I have a lot of Scorpio in my chart. I'm a Scorpio rising. I also have a Scorpio south node. So I understand what it's like to have the obsessions, very much at one with the obsessions, and understand what that's all about. It was really interesting for me this week to learn some of the theory behind that. So the psychological theory that I was given is this. In childhood, we go through this process, we're meant to go through this process of idolizing our parents. Like when we're 5 or 6, we're meant to look up to mum and dad and think that they're the most incredible people in the world, and we look up to them and we're like starry-eyed looking at them, right? And then as we go into early adulthood, as we get into our teens, you know, we're teenagers, we start to rebel, we start to separate, we start to dye our hair green and pink and blue and whatever else, and really rebel from our parents and try and separate from them and try and create our own identity. This is one reason, one of the many reasons why being a teenager is so awful. You could not pay me enough money to go back there unless I could go back with the wisdom I had now 20 years on. But yeah, it's a really tough time to go through, to try and figure out who you are as a person, who you are as an adult. And this process of separating from our parents is really natural. That's how we learn who we are as people and how we get that autonomy, because it's obviously not going to be healthy to stay completely obsessed with your parents. That would be weird. We have to break away from that and become our own people and have our own lives and have that autonomy and that individuality. Now that process can be interrupted in 2 ways. One, it gets interrupted in your teenage years when your parents don't allow you to do that breaking away, or they shame you for doing that breaking away, and you're made an example of for having individual choices and opinions and dyeing your hair, piercing your ears, whatever it might be, things that are really of no consequence but that your parents might not like. So that's one way that the process can get interrupted. And on the other side, the process is interrupted when the process doesn't even start. And what I mean by that is you don't even begin going through the process of idolizing your parents, because your parents are either physically absent, they're not there, they're emotionally absent, like they're physically there in the home, but they really don't want to be there, they're really not engaged, or your parents are people that you're afraid of, you don't look up to them, they're something to be feared or not really respected. There's something there whereby you don't begin the process of idolizing them. So you either don't begin the process of idolizing them, or when you have begun that process and then you're trying to separate in your teenage years, that process is interrupted. Incidentally, This is also why this obsessive behavior towards romantic partners tends to start in your teenage years. That tends to be when it manifests. That's when you're put in, I mean, I'm a child of the 80s, so when I was in my teens, it was what, like late 90s, early 2000s? You know, that was back in the day when you buy magazines, you'd put posters on your wall, and you went to freaking HMV, and you know, you had those racks of posters, do you remember them? And you'd like leaf through and get one of those posters and put the poster on your wall of the heartthrob du jour, whoever it was. And so that is part of that process, right? It's part of that process of, well, no, it's not part of the process, actually. That's not true. It's the start of the pattern. It's the start of the pattern. So what does that have to do with Miss Obsessed? What does it have to do with this pattern of being obsessed? Well, if that process is broken in the two ways that we described, guess what starts to happen? We start to idolize other things and other people. So we might be idolizing the celebrity, right? We talked about that the other week, about celebrity crushes, but I want to go a little deeper with that. Maybe I will at the end of this video, maybe it's a new video, we'll see. But we either idolize celebrities, and that's a pattern that continues. It's not just a teenage thing, it like continues into our adult life, which is more common than you would imagine. Or we start projecting that onto romantic partners, like people we actually know, people we're crushing on, people we've met, people we know from work, people we've met through friends, someone we've met on a dating app, whatever it is, and we start to obsess over them. So what's happened is this transference from being a child who's idolizing their parents, but you didn't really break out of that. And so you're trying to, subconsciously, in the background, what you're trying to do is go through that process in its entirety, break away from the parent, and then become your own person. But if that's not happening, you just keep going in this loop of obsessing about people, and the obsession is the idolization process. So how do we break this? We break this by doing what we should have done in our teens, which is breaking away and becoming our own person. So a really practical way to do that, if you are obsessing about someone and putting them on a pedestal, whether that is someone who is, like I say, someone you actually know, whether it's a celebrity, whether you're involved in fandom. I was into fandom for such a long time. If you don't know what fandom is, it's basically when you really like a film or a TV show and you go really deep into it, and there's a community of people who really love the same thing, and you're like obsessing about a certain aspect of the show, usually a certain character. I mean, fandom is big business, like it's a whole thing, but you're obsessed with this one person, idea of a person, character, whatever, and you put them up on a pedestal. It's the idolization. So we break that by looking at that person that we're obsessed with as an adult, looking at it, understanding why, which is all the reasons I've explained, and then by applying this really balanced adult perspective of, this is a person. This is a person with needs and wants and hopes and dreams and fears and failures and disappointments. This is a person with flaws and good qualities, right? This is someone who is a fellow human being, who is not perfect, who is doing their best just like we all are. And when we do that, we start to take this person down from the pedestal, and we can start to have a relationship with them in a way that is a lot more healthy. Idolizing someone and obsessing about them and putting them on a pedestal is not going to be good for you, and it's not going to be good for them, and it's not going to be good for the relationship, right? Now, I do want to speak to the celebrity aspect of this, and maybe I should have called this video Why We Obsess About Celebrities, because that was actually a comment I got recently, and it's a very valid one. The reason why we obsess about celebrities is this very thing. It's this idolization process that got interrupted as children. And I can't help but wonder what that does to some of these public figures and these celebrities. And, you know, I watched the video I made a couple of weeks ago about the celebrity crush thing. And I kind of said, you know, it's sometimes easier to use this celebrity crush analogy to get to know your needs, because celebrities are not really real people. So it's more of a fun way to do it. And I looked at how I phrased that, and I'm like, one, that's not true. And two, that's actually not how I feel. So I just wanted to set the record straight on that. And how I feel about it is, celebrities are obviously real people. They're human beings. Fame is not a real thing. Fame is a made up thing. And if someone's famous or not is very subjective anyway. But they are real people who just happen to do something for a living that involves being in the public eye, whether that's film or TV or music or sports, athletics, whatever it is, you know, philanthropy, whatever business, whatever it is that's made them elevate into public public knowledge, being a public figure, right? But they're still a person. And it's interesting, recently I've encountered a lot of people who know quote unquote famous people. And it's like, oh, they're just people. They're just people. And I can't help but wonder what that does to the celebrity, the public figure. What does that do to someone? What does that do to the man who is constantly surrounded by people, like crowds of people screaming at them, or constantly subjected to this kind of projection that fans are putting on him, or being really aware that people are obsessed with him, being really creeped out at like signings and Comic Cons when people are being really fucking creepy and weird and acting like they know you when they don't know you and you've never met them before. Like, what does that do to the individual, I wonder? And I think what it does to the man or woman, but I'm going to say man in this case, 'cause it's usually women obsessing about men, is the model I've seen. I'm sure the opposite models apply as well, but from what I've seen. So what does that do to the man? That's a man that's really unseen. That's a man that's thinking, they don't really like me because I'm such a body, because I'm such a person. They only like me because I'm in this film or this TV show. They only like me because of what they're projecting onto me, and they're not actually seeing me, and nobody actually likes me for who I am. And I just can't help but wonder if that's why a lot of these men, most of them are actors, particularly in the shows that have really big fandoms, that have really big groups of fans surrounding them. I can't help but wonder if that's why a lot of these men are not in stable partnerships. They're not in relationships because they don't feel seen, and that impacts people on a deep psychological level. And I think that is really, really sad. And so what we need to do really, and I'm speaking as much to my former self as I am to you, is that we need to take ownership of how this broken process of idolization and how it manifests in putting people on pedestals, particularly celebrities. It actually causes a lot of damage to the individual, to the person, to the celebrity, to the public figure, and that's something that is worth thinking about. So there's a lot to think about this week. Just think about that process and think where that process was interrupted. Did the process even start when you were 5, 6 years old? Did it not? Was that process interrupted when you were in your teens? And has that manifested as this pattern of obsessing, which is really this interrupted natural process of idolization? Let me know how you get on. Journal on it, meditate on it, go for a walk, think about it, contemplate, and let me know how you get on in the comments. That really helps me to see how this is resonating and how it's helping you. That would be really amazing. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next week.